Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third episode of the Angular Community Q&A. And today we have the NGXS team. Welcome, everybody. With me are Mark. I'm going to point him out. Mark right here, Joaquin right here, and Aliakséi right there. And I thought it would be nice for those of you that don't know you that we do a little brief introduction of ourselves, like who you are, what you do in the NGXS team, and if you have anything else to share. So Mark, let's start out with you.
So first of all, I just wanted to start up by saying this is not all of the NGXS team. There are 4 other members that couldn't fit on the screen with us today. So so this is part of the NGXS team. But yeah, it's really, really great to be here. I'm a software engineer from South Africa. I do consulting to companies in terms of building software, mainly Angular, Angular architecture, quite involved in open source. And yeah, and I lead the core team for NGXS. Yeah.
Also not an unimportant role. Great to have you here, Mark. Joaquin, how about you?
Hey, yeah, also very happy to be here. So I'm from Argentina. I'm currently living in Buenos Aires. And yeah, I'm a full stack developer, currently working as a freelance and mainly working with Angular and Firebase. I joined the NGXS team, I think last year. I started contributing with the team, and then creating a couple of plugins for NGXS. And yeah, so it's been great being in the team this year. So glad to be here.
Awesome. It's great to have you join. And then Aliakséi, special flew in from Australia.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's 5 in the morning here. My name is Aliakséi. Maybe someone see me hanging around different meetups talking about NGXS and Angular related things. I'm involved a lot into community and Google Developer Expert. Yeah, also I'm running I host at Angular Rocks podcast, and yeah, I'm part of NGXS team, which I'm really proud of. So I like this state management solution, using it for many years, and so kind of advocating that.
Very cool.
And glad to be here today.
It's great to have you. And actually, Aliakséi was the one reaching out to do this Q&A, which is got this ball running. And I think you had a new interview on Angular Rocks with a special guest, the last one that came out.
Yeah, it was very special guest, actually. Not just very. Yeah, it was interview with Mishka Hevery, so the creator of Angular. If someone didn't listen yet, just go and listen. It's great guest, and he asked a lot of. I asked him lots of great questions about Angular history, and a little bit of Angular future as well. So yeah. Check it out.
Yep, definitely recommend it. So very cool. Today we're going to talk about NGXS, State Management Library. And I think Mark's going to give us a little bit of context, the background, how it came to be. And then we're going to go over to the questions. And I think that the first question there will be probably one of a lot of people are interested about. But yeah, let's do a little bit of brief history so we have some shared knowledge about the project.
Okay, so first of all, I want to start by just apologizing if my voice disappears or if I look tired and sleepy. It's because I am, because I'm very, very sick at the moment. But I'm glad we could make it, and my voice is at least holding up right now.
It is.
So NGXS really comes. So NGXS was born in the beginning of 2018. Yeah, in the beginning of 2018. The first commit was, I think, in February of 2018 by Austin McDaniel.
Mark, was it 17? I think it was 17, actually.
I don't know. I think it was 2018. I'm pretty sure it was 2018. Yeah. Anyway, so Austin McDaniel was the original author of NGXS. He originally wrote a plugin called NGRX Actions, which was basically trying to take NGRX and making it easier for developers to use and to have a bit of more of an Angular feel to it and have better developer ergonomics. And after a while of trying that, he decided actually he needs to start from scratch. So he wrote NGXS, and then he released it. The first time I saw it was on the Angular Air podcast, YouTube podcast, and really from when it was announced, it just absolutely took off. It hit a real need in the community. A lot of people ask what does NGXS stand for, and all it is NG because it's Angular, the X because every library had to add that X because it was not AngularJS. So in place of 2, like NG2 something, it would be NGX and then S for state. So that's pretty much the creative name that came out, and it stuck. And the community absolutely exploded in that first year. I got involved in the project as soon as I saw it. I had done a couple of large NGRX projects and also felt that same desire for something that was simpler, easier to use, that felt more like Angular, had better ergonomics. And so I got involved in the project very early on. I rewrote the entire core pipeline, and then Austin got a React job. So, so then he said, "Well, you're the best guy." So I've been leading the team since then. Yeah, and it's been really great to be involved in such an awesome community. Our Slack channel, I think we have 1,200 people in our Slack channel. We've got a very active community. It's very hard to be the first person to answer a question on the Slack channel because
that's a great problem to have.
Yeah.
And actually, on the Angular Discord, there's also, I'd say, daily activity in NGXS channel. So that's cool. And so great piece of history. Actually, I think the NGX prefix is something coined by Austin together with, I think, Olivier Combe, when they suggested, like, hey, we need to have some special prefix for everything that's like the new Angular 2 and up. And a lot of people
I think Wasim was also pushing for it, but
so great. So great piece of history, and I think you kind of already alluded to it, but let's go into the first question asked in the channel by Toad Senin, which is, any reason why I should use NGXS instead of NGRX? And I hear Aliakséi laughing. This is probably one of the most heard questions. Mark, feel free to take on it, and the other two, if you have anything to allude to it later, feel free.
Well, I mean, the answer is actually pretty simple. So S is closer to your left-hand fingers, so it's actually easier to hit an S than an R. So it pretty much settles the debate. Can we go to the next question?
Yeah.
So it's a very hard question.
So this, I would say that one is not better than the other. They're meeting different needs, and they're for different types of developers.
Yeah.
I'm seeing more and more developers that are of the NGXS type, but that's probably just my spheres of influence. So both of them are based on Redux as the foundation. They're both global state management. So they follow many of the same principles, but NGXS diverges from some of those principles in order to gain better developer ergonomics, a simpler paradigm, something that feels more like Angular, and it's easier to learn and to use. There aren't really any NGXS courses out there because we just find that people pick it up and start using it, and it makes sense. So there's, yeah, I'm actually busy building a course at the moment, but it's not, I don't feel like it's an absolute must-have to do a course to start using it. Some of the main differences, I would say, when you don't think about reducers, you don't think about effects. What you think about is you think about, I have a state, and I'm going to dispatch an action, and a state can essentially almost subscribe to that action and say, I'm going to do something with that action. And when the state executes code in response to that action, that code can also be asynchronous code. So you can mutate your state, you can call a service and then mutate your state again. So it isn't as strict as Redux, where your side effects are kept separate, but it can be done essentially in the same response. So in NGXS, asynchronous work is a first-class citizen. It's not something that kind of gets bolted on. And the code in response to your actions is slightly more imperative code. It's easier for junior and entry-level developers to understand. You can do an entire project and never ever use a switch map or anything like that. There are equivalents to switch map, which is basically just a little flag to say cancelable is true. So we've really focused on developer ergonomics and simplicity. There's also, when you think about your state management, you might think about, I've got my companies, and I've got my orders, and I've got my invoices, and you might think about these different things. In NGXS, those things are represented by a state class. In NGRX, those things are kind of represented by, so I've got my reducers over here, and I've got some selectors over there, and yes, I've got some effects, and conceptually they're part of this thing, but they're kind of sitting in different places. Which can feel a little bit strange or a little bit weird. In NGXS, they've got a home to live in, and that's the state class. And that state class is fully tree shakeable. There's nothing fancy you've got to do to lazy load or have it as a feature state or anything like that. So that's one of the other big differences, as well as our selectors. The signature of our selector is the pure selector function itself. So in the same way with NGRX, where you compose selectors to make more advanced selectors, you do the same thing with NGXS. But for example, I can have a selector that maybe takes in my list of orders and a list of selected order IDs, and it gives me back my selected orders. But the signature of that function is a function with two parameters, which is a array of orders and an array of numbers as IDs. So our selectors are very easy to test. They don't have knowledge about where they kind of come from the global state, because with other state management, every single one of your selectors takes in the global state in order to give you the result. Right. We flip that around a bit, and essentially you do use create selector, or you might use some selected decorators in order to give your selector the metadata that it needs in order to know how to fetch the parts for its parameters. So it is very different to NGRX. It's a very different developer experience. I've been very disappointed in recent times when I've heard people in the Angular community say it's like NGRX with decorators. It is very, very far from that. Yes, it has got decorators, but it's got decorators in order to make it easier to use. But the principles are very far from just being about decorators. So yeah, that was a 10,000-foot run at what the differences are. But really, I think the main thing is try out NGXS on some small project or something like that, and see if it makes sense to you. I'd say one of the biggest advantages is because NGX is easier to learn. There's a lower barrier of entry for people to get into your project, and therefore it actually costs your business less money in terms of hiring and all of that sort of stuff for people to work on the solution. It's not an event in someone's life to learn NGXS because it's so much simpler. It's almost strange to put on your CV,
right?
Because it's not as complex as that, and it's yeah, just as powerful. So
awesome.
One thing I wanted to add on this is my experience. When I started working on an Angular project a couple of years ago, and so I remember that at that time I needed to handle some state and communication between components and all that, and I started. I remember there were a Curata course around component communications and behavior subjects and all that, and so that served well for me for a while. And I got to a point in which I had to scale that a bit, and that's when I started making some research on different state management libraries and all that. And what I ended up doing was that I implemented a feature in my app with NGRX and NGXS and Akira. I tried the same feature with those three libraries at that moment, and yeah, so I could feel the differences between the three. Of course, every library has its you have the trade-offs between those libraries. Some libraries have some pros and some cons and all that. But at that time, for me, the one that made more sense and which I felt was the one that I wanted to use was NGXS at that point. As Mark says, I felt that it was more like Angular-ish because of the decorators and how everything lives together in a class. And yeah, the other big thing that made a lot of sense for me was allowing you to write actions that were asynchronous. Where on NGRX you need to implement effects in order to do that. So those were kind of the two things that I like more, how you have to deal with those things using NGXS versus NGRX. But yeah, that was kind of my experience when I had to choose which library to use.
Awesome. Aliakséi, anything to add to this one?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this question I hear in a lot. So there is an article called 11 Reasons Why You Should Use NGXS as a State Management in Your Angular Apps. I just post the link in the chat. So
you wrote that article, Aliakséi?
Yeah, I did wrote it some time ago. Actually, I also just checked. You was right. NGXS actually was released not in 17. It was released in 18. But for some reason, I was always thinking it was 17. I don't know why. But anyway, so I have pretty much.
Disappeared.
Yeah, it's exactly the reason. So the whole morning I was thinking about 17 for some reason. But anyway, so yeah, I have pretty much why I choose NGXS. That's for a reason, and the reason is my own personal experience. I was actually early adopter of NGRX, and once it came in, I was so amazed. Like, oh wow, I like this idea of state management in Angular applications because I was kind of new into all this back in the days. And so I kind of stick it into my project I was working at that moment, and I was working like with a bunch of people on this project, and like it was great. I mean, it was working great for us, but the thing is, because it's following all this Redux pattern, you had to put a lot of files, and once you come back to this project, you have to remember where you put what things belongs to what, right? And like it was a little bit confusing for us because of all these numbers of files. It's the nature of Redux pattern, and I know there is solutions now which built on top of NGRX. Like there is NGRX data and also NGRX docs. If it's right name, is it NGRX docs? I think it is. So they built on top of NGRX, kind of simplifying things, so you have less files. But anyway, NGXS is kind of by default, it's simple. It has a minimum number of files you have to take care of, and so that's why I choose this state management solution, and I'm still stuck with this solution. If I always recommend it to all of my clients, and everyone is happy, and I'm happy as well with NGXS. So yeah, and I'm recommending it to anyone else. And that's why I'm here today.
Yeah, that's why you're all part of the team. I'm super excited to hear all this. And actually, we just got a message in the chat. I was learning NGRX till NGXS came along, and it felt simple. And I think that's kind of the runaway. Mark has a little bit of code he could share. Let's quickly get that into the screen, and so we can have. Can you bump up the font a little bit, Mark, so we can
a little bit more? Wow.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah, we need to take into account that some people watch this on mobile, so they can.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Sorry about that. I would make everything bold, but I don't think StackBlitz has that. So if you want to have a look at a project that's of reasonable-ish size, I mean, yes, it's a demo project. It's a larger demo project, but it's called NGXS Diner. It is found on GitHub, but if you go to stackblitz.com, GitHub, Mark Whitfeld NGXS Diner, I'll post it in the chat. Then you can have a look through the code and see what it looks like. But this is what essentially we're talking about. So, for example, our diner or our restaurant has some tables. In StackBlitz, I've just got the tables are here as a JSON file. So in my table state, it's a class table state. I can use Angular dependency injection in order to get a hold of my tables API service. I do put an @state decorator at the top, just to say that this is to give it a name in the global state, to give it some default kind of an initial state. And then this is the decorator that we're talking about for, I want to respond to the action called load tables. I'll show you the actions, load tables. So it's just a class, and it's got a static read-only type. So this is really just for convenience to be able to recognize the action. You don't need a constructor. And then, for example, open table, I can give it a table name. So it's just it's a class that's very much like your typical NGRX object literal. And in fact, a constructor function is the same as an action creator function. It's just a function that makes something. So it's very much the same thing. So you refer to your action using the class of the action, so load tables. I've got that action there, action load tables. And then you can see this is an asynchronous method. Load tables, this local state context, the context is how you interact with your state. And here's the action. I'm not actually using anything off of that action there. And then if you have a look here, I go and I actually just put a to promise on my observable. I could have used the observable subscribe and everything if I wanted to. And I just await that promise there. And I go and patch my state. I could go and patch my state before I load that and maybe clear my items in my table before the load, and then set it after the load. So there's no kind of triad of actions that you often see with a very strict Redux pattern where you've got load tables, success, load tables, error, and then you're doing this dance between those three. Asynchronous work is a first-class citizen here, and also the action actually has a life cycle, so you can find out when this action has actually completed. So the completion of this action is actually bound to when the completion of all processing as a result of that action has finished. So an action could take a while to complete if there's some asynchronous work to be done. That's not going to block any other actions from happening, but it is handy to be able to know, oh, once load tables is complete, let me do something else. So you can sequence things like that. It's got like an on-init lifecycle hook. So basically, we just dispatch load tables when it's initialized. And then here's an example of a selector. So it's just a static method on the class. So I'd refer to it by going table state.sorted items, and it gets injected with the local state, and I can do whatever I want. In this case, I just sort them by name and return a sorted list. So that's if you're battling to think conceptually, how is it different? And we're talking about decorators, we're talking about all these different things. So it looks quite different. And then there's some more advanced stuff here where you can essentially create other classes and compose other selectors on it. This method would be tested by just providing these parameters. I don't have to provide it a global state. And then at the level of your page, you just use this decorator here. Well, let me just put that on a new line. So just like you've got at input or at whatever view child, or so you go at select, you put your selector, you refer to it like that, and give it the property, and that will basically just place that observable on that property for you, and you can use it in the normal sort of way that you might do for any other observables being consumed by a component. So that is a very quick rundown in terms of dispatching and that sort of stuff. Let me just show you very quickly. I think it's here. So you can get a reference to the store, and then this .store.dispatch, you create a new one of those things. So I've got add table choice. It's one of my actions. So go new add table choice, table name and recipe name, and I'll dispatch it. And then any of my states can respond to that action being dispatched, just like your typical CQRS Redux style. Hopefully that gives you enough context to at least be interested and try it out and figure out if it works for you or your team. There we go.
Awesome. Thanks. This looks definitely great. I shared the link in the chat, so you should be able to find NGXS Diner there. Cool. Awesome. So yeah, we're in the first half hour, and I think we have a great idea how NGXS came to be, how it's different from its main competitor. It's kind of like with these things, you always have to compare it to the big and known one out there. I think it's not really anything to be done with it. You always have to compare to something similar. But yeah, definitely interested, and I will most likely check it out. I've always been on the camp that I found NGRX too cumbersome. Boilerplate is the famous word that I heard about it. And yeah, this definitely looks like something that is easier to use and more lightweight.
Can I make a quick comment on that boilerplate thing?
For sure.
So I think boilerplate, I think when people talk boilerplate, they often think number of lines of code or number of files or something like that. But I think boilerplate is actually about conceptual simplicity. And where we have that class in that example, that class is a familiar way to structure a unit of something. And the methods on the class are a very familiar way of encapsulating pieces of behavior. So in NGXS, yes, we have some lines of code for classes. We have lines of code for decorators. We have lines of code in functions and those sort of things. You can't get around having lines of code in order to be able to integrate with something.
Sure.
But the fact is that you don't feel those lines of code. You don't feel like I've got to write that line of code because the library wants me to. They almost disappear because they are very familiar things. And I think NGRX with its action creators and the like create reducer and all those things that it has now, potentially you could write less lines of code vertically, maybe. When it gets to your RxJS stuff, maybe it starts to expand out a bit, but it's not really about the lines of code. It's about the lines of code that you feel like you've got to write to get to somewhere. And classes and methods on classes, you don't feel like you have to write that. It just makes sense. It gives you a conceptual framework to hang things off of. And I think that's why often people compare on that sort of front. And that's one of the reasons why people really love NGXS. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on the boilerplate word.
Yeah, great. No, I think that makes sense. And the lines of code is definitely not the main thing you should care about. I also think it's kind of like you need to understand the mental model, and there's diagrams involved, and you need to understand certain terminology. And if you can get rid of a whole lot of that and just show something that works, I'm very much practical-oriented dev. I hate reading docs before I start with something. I really don't do it. I start to code away, and yeah, it needs to work. And if it doesn't, I feel disappointed. And like in myself being this way, but also in the library, that it doesn't really cater for this kind of people. So awesome. Yeah, let's go over a few of the questions. I didn't order them all by most asked because that's how I am. I just do whatever I think is the most interesting thing. And the first question we're going to have here is, what is the planned roadmap for the NGXS Labs Firebase plugin by our resident King Darboja? Joaquin, I think, yep, yeah, pointing the right way.
I can answer that. So yeah, so first of all, I wanted to go give a brief description why this plugin came out. So I was working with NGXS and Firebase in my project, and I kind of find myself in a position where it was not very easy to integrate data from those two data sources. So the data that was on the NGXS state and the data that had to come in from Firebase. Given that Firebase it provides data as a stream, so it keeps feeding you data as the data changes on the server. So that was kind of a situation that was kind of difficult to make it work easy or simple. And yeah, so that's why I initially started writing this plugin, which basically gives you an easier way to handle the stream from Firebase and give you the updates that the stream provides or emits in a more NGXS way. So basically, you can keep all the data in NGXS state, and know when any update or any emission from Firebase comes to you, and that way you can merge or query data from both NGXS and Firebase. Very simple, because everything is on NGXS now, so you can merge data from different origins or data sources, even from other APIs, and it makes everything more simple to handle in your app. So the plugin initially came out with the basic operations. I can actually send a link with the library README and all that, the docs. Even though you don't like to read docs, Dima, but anyway. So basically, you can see that you can connect a query from Firebase with NGXS, and after you do that, the plugin, what it does is that handles for you all the emissions that came in from Firebase, and updates the state at every emission that comes out. So it started with the basic operations. You can connect that stream with NGXS, so that's the main thing. And then the other thing that we did was provide you with a wrapper for you to query and to make updates to Firebase as well inside Actions. So because basically what you want to do is to keep all your updates and all that in the state, or that's kind of what you would prefer. And so that's another helper that we wrote. I think that from now on, one of the next things that we were going to do is writing the paging. So making it simpler to query to Firebase with paging, because right now paging is very, has a lot of different use cases that you can try. So that's kind of a hard one to simplify. And so that was kind of the next thing that we wanted to add into the plugin, in order to provide a way for you to query with paging to Firebase, and also integrate that query into NGXS as well.
Great, awesome. Sounds like super interesting plugin. I think one of the interesting things of Firebase is with state management. Initially, it's kind of counterintuitive, because Firebase does a lot of things for you, and it has a lot of intelligence in the plugin itself. And I've used it as a demo backend for some other state library demos, and I generally just end up trying to break it off all its intelligence and just do like a take one or something to limit Firebase from doing what it's awesome at, like magically appearing stuff. But this definitely seems like something that we can use and add upon there. And I know King, the one asking the question, is a really big Firebase user themselves, so definitely be interested in hearing this. And
sorry, just a quick comment on that. Yeah. So with the what's very interesting about that Firebase plugin is that what Joaquin created there is basically for connecting a stream and synchronizing a stream into your store. So it could actually be used for a different streaming source if you did have one. But the great thing is it's taking in those Firebase objects kind of as their object references themselves. So you're not suffering a greater memory hit or anything by kind of copying and spreading these objects. But it really makes it seamlessly just fit into your normal application development flow. And you just in the same way that you would would just maybe call an API to get some data. This gives you a way of interacting with, plugging in a stream in just a very few lines of code, 4 or 5 lines of code, and then it's done. And you don't think about it, and you don't feel like you're doing Firebase anymore. So, I mean, I personally wrote a very large application that's being used to run certain aspects of a hospital. I can't really release too much more information about it, but I mean, it's dealing with massive amounts of data. Firestore is in the back end, and I don't even think about Firestore. It just works. So
that's great.
Yeah, I really rate that plugin.
Awesome. Let's quickly move on, because we still have quite a few questions left, and I'd love to touch on as much as possible. So let's see if we can make like 3 or 4 minute answers, which might be difficult. I'm not gonna stop you, but so next one, and this is one that's quite dear to my heart. What's the equivalent of NGRX component store in NGXS? And this one is from Ajit Singh. Ajit, thanks a lot. You provided a bunch of great questions. I'm personally a big fan. I've basically switched all my production apps that I was actively working on from NGRX Global Store to Component Store, because it just makes a lot of sense for my mental model. And I had the honor of having Alex in my show, in my own stream BLS, to explain me about it. So I don't read docs. I just invite library authors to come and tell me how to use their stuff. So that's kind of the laziest way I could figure it out. So I know there's something in the works. Probably Mark, you want to take this, or anybody else that wants to take this on?
I can.
Yeah, I guess Mark have a lot of things to say about it.
I don't want to do too much talking. I want to give Alexei a chance as well. He's sat quietly. So I mean, first of all, NGRX component store is not bound in any way to NGRX store. You can use it entirely independently, and just because it comes from the NGRX library of things doesn't mean that it fits better in an application that's using NGRX or NGXS. Or so you can use it. You are welcome to use it. We don't have to come out with an equivalent on our side necessarily. That being said, I mean, there are many great solutions. There's like what's it? Michael Schlatke's RX State. Yeah, from RX Angular, RX State, RX Angular State, and there's lots of really great solutions out there. There is one that I'm working on personally, which it feels more NGXS-like. It's focused a lot on developer ergonomics. I'm using it in a production project at the moment. I'm getting feedback from people in the community, but I don't want to release it to the community yet. If the community doesn't need it, I don't want to create another option out there. So at the moment, yeah, I've chatted to some guys on the Angular team, other guys in the community. Yeah, there's lots of excitement about it, but I want to make sure that I do it right. So that's on the roadmap in the future, not necessarily NGXS, although there will be an integration with NGXS to make it very, very clean and simple. So
great.
Yeah, right. And the reason why NGRX component store exists, there is probably there is a reason for that, right? Why is there? And as Mark stated, it's not necessary we actually need equivalent at NGXS. I mean, first of all, when you're dealing with, look, there is lots of solutions to handle state management, right? Especially these days, like in Angular land, just crowded with like lots of different approaches. You can even build your own if you want using behavior subject, right? So, I mean, yeah, just when you're choosing a state management solution, just first of all, pick the one which fits your mental model. And if you are working in a big team, in a big business, make sure that this solution won't cost much to your company.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, speaking about complexity, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, so it might become something, but it's not something that needs to be there per se. And yeah, I think what you said, Alexa, is totally true. There's so many good options there, valid options, and you just need to make sure what makes sense for your team. Awesome. Great question again. We have another question, which is more of a technical, I guess. Is there any way to create selectors that don't emit immediately? And there's more context to it, by the way, but this person didn't really get the message that we just have very limited screen space. So I'm going to read it out. For example, suppose you initialize state value as null or undefined, and you want a state selector that doesn't emit until that value is none-no. You can obviously do this with an RxJS operator, but if you use the same state slice in a lot of different spots, it can become cumbersome or error-prone. And that's the whole question, which never would fill out the screen. Joaquin, I see you preparing for an answer.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, and actually, I think, Mark, you replied to something similar recently. So yeah, so selectors basically, by design, they emit the values as soon as they have something to emit, as soon as the state has changed. You can create better selectors, narrowing down what you select so that the emission only happens when that piece of state has changed. So NGXS allows you to narrow down what you select, and by that you narrow down the emission count, but you cannot filter on the value. So as the example that he was saying. So yeah, I think that yeah, there is no way other than, yeah, you can pipe the result of the selector and kind of change or filter there what you want based on the value, and do something based on the value that gets emitted. But that's what you can do.
So I'll post a link to a very similar issue that was posted. I'm not sure if it's the same person, that was posted recently on our issues in NGXS. And so one of the things about a selector is it's pure, and a selector should always be able to answer the question that you ask it at any point in time. And that answer might be null or undefined. For example, before some information is loaded, you might not be able to answer that question. When you compose selectors, you should be ready for other selectors not being ready to be able to answer that question yet. And you should be designing your selectors in that way. That is intentional. So that, for example, if at some point I ask the store and I say, we've got a method select snapshot, so you can give it a selector and it'll tell you right now what is that value. If that logic is built into the selector, it's just weird. The selector's got to be able to answer that question straight away. So that is the kind of thing that should be done with your pipe using RxJS. A very good example is, for example, when I'm loading a page, I want to know what claims have been established for this user, and maybe the user is logged in, but maybe I have to hit some other endpoint to find out what their claims are, or inspect some token, or do something else, or do some other checks to find out what the established claims are. What company are they part of? What are they in a group of users, et cetera, those sort of things. So maybe I have part of the information, but not all of it. So essentially, that established claims observable, you'd only really want it to answer the question when it has an answer for you, to either say no claims or here are the claims. So in that case, that's the sort of scenario that you're hitting there, and it's better to do that using observables, so that you can say, okay, let's filter it until we reach this state, so that we can actually answer the question. I hope that makes sense. I'll have a look for that issue now and post it as my voice collapses.
Great. No, that's not great, but great that you share the link, and I'll share it. I'll reshare it in the chat. Let's move on with the next one. How can I reassure my architects that NGXS is a good bet in terms of long-term support? Maybe Aliakséi, you as an advocate from the project, this might be something you've heard before.
Yeah. So let me think about it. Right. I mean, you see, it's architects, right? If they usually making these sort of decisions on a project, like because the way you implement in your component, like state management is right. It's like a component communication data flow, right? So the way you design the component communication data flow in your application, it's kind of dictates the architecture of your application. And so how would you convince architects of your, I think the best way is, I mean, if you are an architect, but if you can make this decision, right? But if you're not architect, if you're just a developer, how would you convince your architect? I think there is a couple of things here. So first of all, what is your organization like, and if your organization want to save money, right? So if your organization want to save money and spend less time on building and writing code, so it means you want to use the solutions which have less boilerplate. It's already been said, NGXS has really tiny boilerplate. So maybe it might be a selling point for you, right? Like if you connect the dots, money and complexity, right? Because every organization wants to save money. And if you find kind of an arguments that this particular solution we want, it might, I mean, it can be anything, right? In this particular case, you want to convince about NGXS, but there could be other libraries and things. You always need to connect those with money to organization, how organization will benefit. And the benefit for any organization, for any particular solutions they're choosing is usually, it's about money, right? So yeah, that's my probably recommendation for you.
Awesome. I like that answer, and I probably think it's a safe bet. I've worked on quite a few teams in the past years, dozens of projects, and a vast part also used NGXS. And
yeah, and the second part of this question is in terms of long-term support, right? I mean, look, NGXS has been here for many years. Check out the number of downloads. There is about 60,000 downloads per week right now. So it means many people using this solution. And so, yeah, it should be good. I mean, if you bet
it's not
on
going
NGXS, yeah, exactly.
It's not going away.
if you bet on NGXS, you will be sure that you'll get strong long-term support. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. We have time for two more questions. Last one is, I think, a nice one to wrap up. But before the last one, another question from Ajit Singh. And this is, can you tell me any major website or clients that are using NGXS in production like NGRX is used via Firebase? Now, we touched on the Firebase part, but I'm actually curious about the large major websites and clients that are using this. Any big names out there?
Well, I mean, first of all, I wanted to state that we have specific code in NGXS that says if your project is over 20,000 lines of code, then it'll stop working. So, no, I'm just kidding. Just a small bit of background on that is some people, they interpreted NGXS as like XS extra small for small projects, and I don't know where that idea comes from, but very, very large enterprise applications have been built with NGXS. Unfortunately, we can't mention the names of the companies, but I mean, from insurance companies to banks, to legal firms, I've already mentioned insurance companies, to internet marketing. I can't really mention many of the companies' names because of, yeah. But we can maybe post a couple of links to a couple of those websites. But if your question is really aiming at, is it being used by any brands or names that you might know? The answer is yes. And also, can it be used on big projects by bigger teams and those sort of things? And the answer is most definitely yes. So, unfortunately,
I guess I have similar NDAs that don't allow me to talk about any of the project internals, but I've worked with big banks that are out there. Well, I actually work with teams that work with the banks, but they decided to use it, and yeah, definitely. Yeah. Great question. And then I think for the last one, and this brings us kind of to the top of the hour, which is great timing here. And there's a few more questions, but everybody's welcome to go to the NGXS channel in the Angular community Discord or in the Slack. And we'll actually make sure, if it's not there already, because we're pretty non-competitive, we don't really care that there's competition. We should make sure to have the Slack link in the description here. So if people want to get into the special zone, and of course, everybody's welcome to come to the Angular Discord. But if you have any questions that are not answered today, feel free to reach out to one of these channels and ask. And that's gonna go to the last question right here. If a person is new, and if a new person wants to start contributing to NGXS, how can they start? Are contributions welcome? Well, this is a great question.
Yeah, it's a great question, and the answer is yes. Contributions are always welcome. If you're a new person, yeah, you probably join a Slack channel, so you will be part of the whole community there. And if you want to propose any ideas you want to contribute into, or if you don't know what you want to contribute into, you might get help there. There is some outstanding issues there that we want to make it to happen, right? For example, there is on the list, the schematics on the list. So we kind of started working on it, but it hasn't been finished yet. So this one might be in top priority. So yes, there is more issues. Maybe Mark can share some issues, some other outstanding issues there, which we will welcome a contributions into.
Yeah, I think in terms of getting involved, ask your questions. If you want to contribute PRs, if you want to try and create plugins, we have a very, very active community. We have plugins for easy integrations with forms, with the router, with WebSockets, with logging to the console or the dev tools or Firestore, or synchronizing with local storage. We have lots of plugins in our labs, which are yeah. So there's a lot going on in the community. We'd love for anyone who wants to get involved to get involved. Use it on your project. Give us feedback, critical or non-critical feedback. It's all absolutely welcome. But I would say actually the one thing that Aliakséi mentioned, the biggest need at the moment, I would say, is someone who knows schematics really, really well. We are wanting to put together some update schematics ahead of some changes that we want to make into V4 of NGXS. We have been on V3 since 2018, and I personally am quite proud of that fact, because that means that we haven't broken anyone's applications for 3 years. And we actually we support all the way from Angular 6 to Angular 12. So we are supporting 6 Angular versions, which does take quite a bit of effort with all the things that are going on. So I think our biggest need at the moment is for someone to help out with schematics, and that's probably quite a critical piece. So if you are a schematics guru, please let me know. We've started in the effort. We had someone helping us out. Unfortunately, some health issues slowed things down there. So yeah, we'd love some.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Schematics authors out there, this is your chance to shine in the NGXS project. I'm gonna do another pop-in question. Ciao Tran, does NGXS have a donation account like Open Collective or GitHub sponsors? Do you accept donations?
Yes, we do have an Open Collective account. It's we generally use that budget for marketing or for making sure that our domain is paid for and those sort of things. Unfortunately, there's nothing that can help with paying developers on the project, which it would be amazing to do that full time, as with all open source, I'd imagine. But yes, there is a place. Every bit helps. So yeah, thanks for the question.
It's opencollective.com/NGXS, and I'm gonna also link the website, which is ngxs.io. For people who do read docs, they seem to be pretty well put together. So great effort there. I want to thank you all so much for joining this in I think we cover 4 time zones, which is kind of cool. Thanks a lot for being here today.
How's tomorrow looking, Aliakséi, by the way?
Yeah, it's getting better. It's getting better.
Awesome. It was great having you on. I hope this this gains some new interest to the project for people who have been using one other state management library. Thank you all very much, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye.
Awesome to be with you. Thank you very much. Bye.
See ya. Bye.